Welcome back to the ASEAN-EU Health Summit. Thank you for staying online, those of you who are online. And thank you to all of you here for joining me at this breakout session A on tackling substandard and falsified medicines in ASEAN. Now, it's a very short session, as I mentioned, and we have 5 speakers on the panel. So please allow me to keep it short and snappy. Falsified and substandard drugs are a massive problem here in Southeast Asia. According to our EU-ABC paper last year on illicit trade, it revealed that 1 in 10 of pharmaceuticals in LMICs, low middle income countries, which includes countries in ASEAN, are falsified. Now, this is a worrying number, but I am no expert on this matter at all, which is why we have on today's panel Cambodia's Director General for Health, His Excellency Hok Kim Cheng, Malaysia's Ministry of Health, Saliha Abdul Rahman, Deputy Director of the Pharmacy Forensics Section at the Pharmacy Enforcement Division. We have Stephen Dunn, Head of Product Security Investigations at APAC at Sanofi. And last but not least, we have Brett Marshall, Corporate Head of Quality Assurance at Zuelik Pharma. And joining me here in Singapore is Ramesh Rajkishore, Regional Director Asia Pacific at the Pharmaceutical Security Institute. Thank you, panelists, for joining me today. Let me just get straight into the questions. And if I may begin first with Ramesh to sort of set the tone for the breakout session. Now, you spent years as a law enforcement officer and now at PSI. Your team works very closely with key stakeholders and you carry out intel gathering operations to share findings with other law enforcement agencies, including Interpol. So ASEAN has a reputation, right, as a hub for fake medicines. Why is it so rampant in this region? And is there a correlation between the growing online presence in ASEAN and the sale of counterfeit medicines? And if so, what is the impact?
Okay, that is a very relatively big question, but in the interest of time and to allow my other speakers as well to come on board. Okay, so let me just start with some stats off the cuff, right? ASEAN, what's that now? 650 million people or more. We have 4 out of the 10 busiest ports, and with such big land space, obviously, we must understand and appreciate how porous the borders can be. And it's also not a surprise to realize that just last year alone, the amount spent on the purchase of illicit products went up to almost $2.6 billion, right? So there are many factors. So I'm just trying to give you in a nutshell, all right? Large land space, as I mentioned, porous borders, which means criminals can go in and out quite fairly easy. And ASEAN itself, many of the countries are in the different stages of development, which means not everybody would have the same capacity, law enforcement abilities, technology, and obviously priority. What Singapore sees as a priority may not be the same view that is shared by our counterparts in Philippines or Cambodia or even in Myanmar. Right. So now Myanmar obviously has its different sets of issue, but let's not go there. So aside from that, right, so borders, different technology and also technology. ASEAN itself in Asia, it's consumes half the world's population in terms of using technology. So then again, so with so many issues coming up, it shouldn't be a surprise as to why that we are labeled as a rampant, and also it's a rampant issue here. Unlike the EU, which aside from Brexit issues, the ASEAN itself does not share one voice when it comes to dealing with pharmaceutical crime. Not many would know that every year, more than 300,000 children die just because of consuming counterfeit drugs. At some point in time, this COVID pandemic will find a resolution and we will move on. But still more than 300,000 children will die because of counterfeit medications, right? So we need to share what we find. This is a big issue. Even in this year itself for the pandemic, in terms of for online, PSI carried out our own global initiative where we found tens and thousands of illicit websites. These websites also includes social media, your marketplace postings. And what PSI did was that we collected everything and we surfaced it to international law enforcement agencies, to Interpol for them to run the Operation Pangea, to Europol for them to run Operation Shield, and also to our regional partners as well. So yes, so it's a very big question. So I'm not going to hog this because I could go on for an entire day talking about it. But yes, so I will let my others, panelists take it from here.
Thank you, Ramesh. Maybe I can direct the next question to His Excellency, Dr. Hawk. I'm wondering, right, because Cambodia has seen a surge in counterfeit products in recent years, among them medicines, but it's actually encouraging to see Cambodia taking firm action against wrongdoers with regular crackdowns and actually coming up with an agency called the Counterfeit Committee of Cambodia to sort of oversee the issue. Now, is this the way to go for governments to tackle the trade of fake drugs? Who are its strongest partners, and are you doing anything to sort of strengthen the enforcement online? Because, you know, as Ramesh mentioned, a lot of it happens online.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank for invitation for me to share the knowledge and experience on the ASEAN-EU Health Summit today on behalf of the Ministry of Health Cambodia. In Cambodia, there are, the existing legislation to control the pharmaceutical, medical product, device, and cosmetic, such as the law on pharmaceutical management. And we have the sub-degree of the government on the cosmetic and management and other related regulations. The management of medical product and cosmetic in Cambodia is fall under the general competence of the Ministry of Health. The National Regulatory Authority of the Ministry of Health is the department in charge of the managing of the medical product and cosmetic in accordance to the provision of the law and other applicable legislation. According to the Cambodia regulation, the medicine online is illegal. Ministry of Health regularly educate and provide awareness to the people, and also, issue the press release to warn the public on the online sale of medicine. The regulatory officer monitor the social media, website, as well as collaborate with Department of Anti-Cybercrime of the Ministry of Interior to find the location to take the legal action. The regulatory framework has been implementation focusing on pre-market registration, the pharmaceutical product with ASEAN Common Technical Dossier ACTD, ASEAN Medical Device Directive, ASEAN Cosmetic Directive, in order to facilitate the technical barrier for all companies to register among the ASEAN member states. In operation the process, the official of the Ministry of Health operate with the prosecutor to join by relevant local authority, to take the action. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If I may now go to Stephen. Stephen, your responsibilities at Sanofi include identifying, developing, implementing, and maintaining anti-counterfeiting and product security processes throughout APAC. Now, I want to ask you, how have criminals and the trade of counterfeit, falsified, substandard medicines have evolved over the years? For example, exploiting technology to create novel fake drugs, or to quickly manufacture them, or to evade detection and so on. Maybe you can weigh in on that.
I think it's a common misunderstanding that people who counterfeit drugs are actually making a drug. So while in movies you have counterfeiters who have set up some kind of sophisticated laboratory to actually duplicate a drug, in reality they're selling something that looks like a drug, but which often contains No active pharmaceutical ingredient at all, just starch or sugar or some other cheaper active ingredient that they've substituted for it. Or in the case of injectables, water, or we've had cases where people substituted Lysol for vaccines. So it's counterfeiters use technology, I think, to hide their location, to sell their product, and to receive and hide their money, but not to actually produce their product. If that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much for that. Maybe this is a question that maybe Puan Saliha can answer. Drugs, it looks like the real thing, but maybe not the real thing. So how can regulators like yourself fix this problem? We continue to see substandard, fake, illegal drugs continue to permeate the market across Southeast Asia. So maybe your role as a regulator, what are some of the steps that Malaysia has taken to ensure that you keep the public safe?
Thank you, Liana. Okay, for Malaysia, I think that's right. Meaning that it looks like drug, but it's not a drug. Okay, because for Malaysia, as a regulator, we have a quite comprehensive legal framework that caters govern the control of medicine in Malaysia. And when it comes to drugs in Malaysia, everything must be registered. Yeah. So let's say for these counterfeiters, which they imitate or copy an innovator or generic medicine. For Malaysia, actually for registration, we have a unique individual registration number. And then we have, they have to affix, to the registered products security level. Yeah, so that is how in Malaysia we can sort of authenticate and also identify the products or the medicine, whether it's genuine or it's counterfeit. That is how we do it basically when we, let's say, enforce in the market, or we do surveillance in the market. And from there on, we can, normally we have, if we suspect this is counterfeit medicine, we will look into our database. Firstly, of course, whether it's legitimate number, and later on we have to look at the label security level, and we have this forensic lab in terms of physical lab that we can sort of identify or authenticate the label itself. So from there on, we can sort of detect whether this is counterfeit or original medicine in that sense.
So we've heard a lot about what the public sector, what governments can do to tackle this issue. Maybe I can go to Brett now. Like many things, public-private partnership is extremely important in solving problems. You are a strong advocate for change for the quality landscape in Asia. I'm wondering, how are private sector leaders like yourself ensuring that the public has access to quality medicines? And how can businesses work together with other stakeholders like governments and your local communities to sort of get rid of this problem, Brett?
Yeah, I think that we're an organisation that works across 14 markets here in Asia, so that obviously includes the ASEAN nations. And one of the things that we observe is just how important it is for us to be able to set up a quality management system that operates across our business and operates in a way that that maintains the sanctity of the supply chain, the integrity of product and patient safety. So that means putting in place infrastructure systems, processes, training of people to be able to support that supply chain activity. And then putting in place as a part of that process management, making sure that product that comes into the part of the supply chain that we control comes from a legitimate point of manufacture. And that's where we work quite closely with, obviously, our manufacturing clients make sure that the integrity of that process remains tight. We also work very closely with the regulators of the markets that we operate in. Obviously, because we're representing multinational organisations or global manufacturing organisations, then the quality standards that we need to operate to are to international standard. And we work fairly closely with the regulators as well in the markets to ensure that the local regulatory frameworks that are being drafted and being implemented, and that the enforcement authorities are working to support, that we work in conjunction with those organisations and with the regulations at the local level. And that includes the management of the product from the time it comes into the country right through to delivering to customers, and then where we're responsible for what we call reverse logistics, so product that's coming back from the trade, making sure that the product integrity and the stewardship of that product is maintained, and that the security systems are maintained right through to the point of destruction, because it's often around destruction that you can see issues which can contribute to the proliferation of counterfeit products related to the destruction of the packaging.
Right. So this is something that, Zulik Pharma ensures to do, working very closely with suppliers, manufacturers, packagers, distributors. But I'm just wondering, is this the norm across the board? Ramesh, maybe you'd like to jump in, Stephen as well. Is there enough data being shared to ensure, for example, supply chains can get very fragmented? Are we making sure that we have enough data to know for traceability and accountability?
Okay, let me start first, Stephen, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Well, there will be never a case where we have enough data. Data will always be insufficient, right? But more importantly is that what do we do with the data? How do we manage the data? How do we transfer the data into valuable outcomes, right? The fact of the matter is that PSI has been collecting a vast amount of data, as I've already mentioned earlier. And we have been having good working relationship with countries like Malaysia, Philippines, and so on and so forth. But the real challenge in extracting any data or even giving data would be to countries in the first world, because first world countries do not foresee themselves as having a problem. But what I would want to channel their energy is that being first world countries, they should look and adopt a mindset where they should be leading and formulating policies and frameworks as to how intelligence or data should be shared, managed, and transferred. So all, in a nutshell, data is never enough. I think our successes are with more developing countries rather than first world countries. And we are even not on par with Europe or even in LATAM. They share a lot more than us. Stephen?
Yeah, there's a lot of data out there, both, I don't know, for want of a better word, in the matrix, just by analyzing online traffic and social media listings. And also individual companies have a lot of data, and sharing that has been a problem, because you run into issues of budget and intellectual property and proprietary processes and protection of sources and so on. So it really is very difficult to organize an effective data sharing protocol for anti-counterfeiting work. PSI has done a lot of work to break down those silos, but I think a lot more remains to be done. And the second part of that is, within companies, there's a lot of data, and business units within big pharma companies don't necessarily share information that could be helpful, even within the company. So there are silos to be broken down both internally and externally.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with him. Even within companies, so yeah, internally and externally, I think we need to come out with a system and a mental model as to how we want to share.
Right, Brett, any input from you, please?
Yeah, I think you know, it's the data is certainly one element to it. I think, you know, the overall process of communication and timely communication is so important. So from the point of detection of the presence of counterfeit products in a market and the ability to identify the characteristics of that product and then be able to kind of share the information related to that around other markets so that, you know, we can lift the level of vigilance as well. We're certainly seeing a lot more dialogue with organisations such as PSI and Interpol and WHO. And so we're starting to see greater flows of information around specific events that help us to lift our level of vigilance as well. And, you know, where we identify counterfeit products by label or by batch to check that the inventories in our locations and potentially in the locations of our customers too are the legitimate products. You know, we have a role to play there as well.
You. I have one more question, actually. I'm just wondering, right, for detection methods, who is responsible for plugging the gaps in implementing proper detection methods and technologies? Who bears the cost? Are we looking at private sector? Or are we looking more government effort? Maybe Puan Saliha, you can answer this question. Maybe the kind of detection technologies that are needed to track and measure the production and trade of such substandard and illicit products, and you know, what would the governments then be responsible for implementing such detection methods and technologies?
Okay, Liana. In our case, I think the first, the government must take the lead first. Yeah. As for Malaysia, as of now, definitely we have the we already have at pharmacy department, we already have the chemistry forensic lab. That is we detect in terms of this is for intelligence purpose. Yeah, when our officers do the surveillance at the market and we suspect maybe this is counterfeit or something like that, and we do the sampling and then we analyze at our chemistry forensic lab, and as well, of course, at the NPRA lab. Yeah, we have a very sampling for market surveillance, and then the NPRA lab will do the analysis. Yeah, so I think the government must take the lead first, and of course later on with the cooperation with the industry, they also must take the responsibility. That's my view. Thank you.
Maybe Brett or Stephen, you'd like to chime in on that. Do you agree with what Puan Saliha has just mentioned?
It's always better for us when governments take the lead. We recognize that resources are limited, especially, you know, in some of the countries of ASEAN. You know, law enforcement and regulators have so many problems to deal with and so few resources that as a private company, we have a duty of care to our patients to monitor the market and to investigate when we suspect a counterfeit. And I've found that if we put a good case together and take it to a regulator or to a law enforcement, that we usually get pretty good response and cooperation. They, you know, regulators right through the region take the problem seriously, and when we bring a good, well-documented case to them, they react.
Yeah, that is very heartening to hear. Brett, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think as Ramesh mentioned in his opening comments, the number of transit points around the countries that make up the ASEAN region is extremely large. The number of international airports has grown quite rapidly, and, you know, when we're talking about shipments of counterfeit product, we're not talking container loads, we're talking suitcases and travel bags.
That's right.
So the entry points can be, you know, the levels of enforcement capability at the second, third, and fourth tier international airports is very different to the main airports, and so you generally that's where we see probably some of the kind of easiest points of access for these products. And then, you know, we're fairly careful about the way that we, when we're enrolling customers that we're going to serve, making sure that they're licensed operators, they have licenses to operate from the prevailing regulatory authority in the country. But you get a lot of wholesale operations as well who split case and start to break packs, and so those wholesale operations tend to be more vulnerable to bringing in product at a lower price, and they may not have the same capability for detection that the product is not a legitimate product.
Right. Yeah. This actually goes to.
If I can just jump in there as well. I think at the end of the day, I think it's all about saving lives, right? Obviously, in developed countries, we are more than happy for the regulators to take the lead, and you know the public sector will always be there to support and follow as well. But there are countries in states where they need the help as well, and this is where public-private partnership should have a jump start and go ahead and do what we want. So you know, in especially this pandemic itself, PSI has, you know, has a good working relationship with Zulik and builds a stronger relationship with Sanofi, with Malaysia, even with CCCC as well. But all in the habit of, it's all about what is it that you need, how is it that we can help you, all with the intent of saving lives. That's the ultimatum.
Yeah, you mentioned two things that I want to jump to point out actually. First one, we mentioned about how porous ASEAN's borders are. So what is your wish list then, you know, to ensure that, you know, the sale of fake and illegal counterfeit medicines do not happen at the borders where these things are happening the most?
All right. So wish list. Okay. No, I don't have a wish list. That would be very naive. But, you know, I want to say what Brett mentioned earlier as well. It's no longer the cases where counterfeits are coming in by container loads. That is not the case. It's now in small parcels. It's air carried. And yeah, so everything moving in small batches. So obviously there won't be a possibility for all law enforcement agencies to stop and hold, obviously because countries to country, they have different priorities, they have different various means of resources, so they can't be doing that as well. So my wish list now, I wouldn't say, but again, wishing, is that for the regulators, the law enforcement agencies, to trust and develop a mindset that, you know, that public-private partnership it's actually not a bad way to go. There are many success stories that's coming up from the EU. There are guiding principles and lessons coming up from there as well. So these are the steps that we can take and move forward. And of course, obviously, again, formulate policies. It's all about cooperation, collaboration, and community policing.
This is a question that I have for everyone. I think we are organizing the ASEAN-EU Health Summit in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm just wondering, has attention on COVID-19 actually diverted efforts into tackling the problem? Has it made matters worse as, you know, demand for personal protection products soar? And, you know, we have this growing culture of self-diagnosing and self-prescribing. Does it also have an impact on the sale? Maybe we can have Puan Salihah or Dr. Hock. You can maybe give us some figures and data whether COVID-19 has actually boosted the sale of such products or exacerbated the problem.
Can I start first? Yeah.
Sure. Hang on. I think His Excellency, you were saying something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to inform you that since the outbreak of COVID-19 in Cambodia, you know that the government take responsible to take care of all the patients for free of charge, and the public and private hospital they are responsible to receive the patient and to take care of the patient, and the medicine and also the PPE supplied by the Ministry of Health. So we don't have the problem with the counterfeit drug medicine to supply to the hospital, to the public hospital. And also we have the the guideline for management of COVID patient, and the private hospital, they must follow up. They must follow strictly the guideline that endorsed by the Ministry of Health. Yeah, thank you.
Saleha, maybe you can, you were saying something?
Okay, actually in Malaysia, we notice about the increase or demand actually, the demand from the public themselves regarding the medicines online. Because during the pandemic, they physically cannot go out, and maybe they are not, they're feeling sick or something like that, and then they are looking at the internet to find their solution. So actually, at our part in enforcement pharmacy division, we actually maybe we increase our effort in sort of monitoring and do the screening online. And then basically we have double, or maybe about double compared to last year or compared to 2019. By personal websites, we will remove the content and also ask the media social provider to block the website or the blogs. So maybe there's a increase in numbers, the website that we block or close down in that sense. And also we are also working very closely with the e-platforms like Lazada, Shopee, for them to do their part also to sort of take down the advertisement, medicine advertisement, which is illegal in that sense. So this is part of our initiative to control and of course to safeguard the public from these illegal medicines.
Right. Actually, on that, we have a question from one of our audience online, whether or not you think that an ASEAN-wide MOU to take down illicit sellers online is something that you want, both governments and the private sector.
Yes.
Maybe you'd like to explain more why this is such an effort is so important for this region.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time and money monitoring the various online platforms and social media accounts for offers to sell diverted, stolen, counterfeit drugs. And the takedown process is painful, to say the least. Trying to send the request through the portals of the various online platforms. And I think if governments could get behind that, it would really make my life much easier. I spend a lot of time fighting to get ads taken down all over the region. And it's not just ASEAN, it's everywhere. It's China, it's the US, it's Europe, it's India.
Well, Stephen, I hope to make your life a bit more easier in the coming months. We have pending MOUs with Interpol. We have one ready to sign MOU with Lazada, and we've already signed another MOU with the Philippines regulators. So we are slowly going out towards the TGA, the Australian health regulators, and slowly we will knock on our neighbor's door, Malaysia's Ministry of Health as well, and all in the hope of trying to get an MOU done. But at the end of the day, what everybody needs to know is that an MOU is technically understanding each other's abilities and capabilities, and it's about managing one another's expectations. That's and then we move forward from there. But yes.
So I'm wondering that, right? Because ASEAN is so diverse, how do we expect everyone to be on the same playing field and in tackling this issue?
Well, let me start this. We can't manage everything to be in the same wavelength. That's why when you draft an MOU or you have a meeting of minds as well, it's about understanding each other's abilities and capabilities and managing your own expectations. The same, brush cannot paint the entire house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Ramesh, and it's not that we want regulators to take responsibility for removing posts that are offering illegitimate products, but that we want them to put that pressure on the platforms themselves, so that when a pharma company or any intellectual property rights holder makes a legitimate request of a platform to remove a post that we can demonstrate as offering an illicit drug of some kind, that they act on that. And some platforms act very quickly and are really responsive, and others do absolutely nothing. I won't name names here, but there's a wide variation in responsiveness among the platforms.
I'm sure maybe Your Excellency, Dr. Hawk, is such an ASEAN MOU to tackle this issue. Is this something that you welcome?
Yeah, I think that the ASEAN leader, ASEAN leaders should work together, with business and to develop the stronger public-private partnership, enforcement action plan to tackle the spread of falsified medicine into the region. I think that I'm really strong support to the commitment of the ASEAN and to implement the action plan together. Thank you.
Right. What about you, Puan Salihah?
Also welcome that kind of MOU, because at the moment for Malaysia, because under one of our act, under Advertisement and Medicine and Advertisement Act, those illegal platforms or platforms which advertise medicine, which is outside Malaysia, actually we just block them. Yeah, we just block, so it cannot be seen by the public in Malaysia. However, there are we have problems. So like let's say like media social like Facebook, Instagram, they when we ask or request for them to remove certain content, medicine, maybe advertisement of medicine, they just not to say ignore. They only remove it if it's I think against their community standard. They have that some standard. It's not based on our request for, maybe this posting is against our legislation per se, but when it comes when that posting is not against their standard, so they won't take it down. So that kind of thing that quite difficult for us in that sense, because public sometimes just say that this posting need to be taken down, but when we request for them to bring it down, they don't do that. So it's still there. Right. So that's one of the problems. So this MOU maybe become a strong force for this bigger company or bigger platforms to sort of listen to us in that sense. Thank you.
Right. Okay, I have one more question actually. I'm just wondering whether the tools and the technical capacity of ASEAN countries, are they robust enough to ensure good practices in manufacturing, quality control and distribution? If anybody would like to answer that. Ramesh, maybe.
I could make a couple of comments. My observation when I look around the region is that certainly as we talked about earlier, the regulation and the legislation that's being put in place, which is increasingly referencing international standards that are promulgated by organisations such as ICH and PICS. And so the regulatory frameworks that the countries have in place is now very much at an international standard. The challenge is probably the enforcement, as we've touched on a couple of times, and just having the resource available to work to enforce the legislation. And I think that the technology side of things, we've talked a little bit about some of the packaging, and certainly the hologram that Malaysia has implemented is a strong action point. We're starting to see some opportunities for solutions like blockchain, but that can be a challenge to scale up. But I think in helping to prevent counterfeits, it does have some capability because it does allow end-to-end traceability through the supply chain. So I think the tools are evolving. I think the regulatory frameworks are in effect. I think the enforcement effort probably needs some additional resource. I think that the technology continues to evolve.
I was actually having this conversation with one of our members yesterday. We talk about technology, we talk about blockchain, but I think the capabilities of some of the ASEAN countries is still not there yet. So I do think it would be difficult to implement, a sort of wish list, I guess. I am very naive. Yes, you're right. I actually have one more question. I'm just wondering, right, can a balance actually be struck between enforcing tough regulations to protect the public health from fake, substandard and counterfeit drugs and improving access to medicines? I think, I believe, if I'm not wrong, the Philippines FDA is, I think there's a law out there to prohibit some of the e-commerce sellers to sell medicines online because they want to clamp down on the trade of illegal drugs. So can there be a balance struck, right? Especially now as people are staying home, they can't go out because of COVID-19. Maybe if they can't find it on an online verified platform, they'll go somewhere else. So can a balance actually be struck between those two, enforcing tough regulations and also improving access to medicines? Maybe I can pose this question to Puan Saliha.
No, actually for this, this is Malaysia's experience, okay? Unlike maybe some of the countries that you mentioned just now in the Philippines, yeah, I believe. For Malaysia, there is no law yet that prohibit the sales of drugs in the online. So actually, we are looking at right now. We are looking at controlling the online health services in terms of their service for health. Maybe start from treatment, and then after that, dispensing of medicines. But other than that, like, because in Malaysia, for controlled medicine, yes, under our Advertisement Act, it's not allowed to be advertised at all. So literally, it's not allowed to be advertised on the internet. However, for OTC, let's say for OTC or traditional, our law doesn't prohibit, doesn't specify which premise or which category of people that can sell that online. So actually, in that sense, there is no law yet that prohibit them from selling it or advertising it online. Yeah. So what we are looking at, maybe this is still our discussion, and when we want to, maybe we may propose specific maybe e-platform just for medicine, that is for Malaysia, but this is yet to be discussed. Yeah. But when you mentioned just now about whether there's a balance, yeah, about enforcing, preventing it from being sold online and improving access in that sense. So to us in Malaysia, whatever it is our law actually to prohibit the customer, the public, from getting any counterfeit drugs or any unsafe or of no quality and not efficacious at all. So whatever we want to public to get access is these registered products, if in the sense of Malaysia. So I think although that there's a strong regulation, everything is just to protect the public. So for me in Malaysia, there's no question about the public cannot get access, because at the moment our health system and also our supply chain, I think, is accessible to every public in Malaysia. So the most important part is to make sure the public doesn't get this substandard and falsified medicines.
Right. Thank you so much, Puan Saliha. We have a question from the floor. Maybe you'd like to, you don't have a mic. So maybe, yes.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you so much for the informative session. I just have one particular question centering on free trade zones. So we all understand and aware that free trade zones are often used to traffic counterfeit goods. And Southeast Asia is home to multiple free trade zones as well, with Singapore more often than not being the center or nucleus. So I guess my specific question to the panelists is that we have spoken about public-private partner collaborations that's needed from a very national framework. I'm trying to understand what are the specific regulations that's needed to ensure that counterfeiting, etc., doesn't quite also happen in free trade zones in Southeast Asia.
Okay. All right. So that's a big, that's a big topic and involves an entirely different legislation altogether. All right. Okay. So free trade zone, FTZ. All right. That is actually the heartbeat of most nations. It decides on the trade volume, and the country's economy as well. Now, if all the understanding, because I've been with law enforcement for a number of years now, so I can say this: if the law enforcement agency is going to have a knee-jerk reaction at every information that comes in with respect to the free trade zone, then most countries may not want to use the route because they might find it troublesome, right? I'm just giving a big overview here. But then again, if law enforcement agencies do not react to intelligence, they allow counterfeit drugs to come in. So what do we do down here? Currently, the approach is, if any information that comes in indicating that maybe a container that comes into an FTZ, free trade zone, through Singapore, and if it's going out to another country, that piece of information is given to the point of landing, the port of landing, right? It's given to that country for them to detain and move on from there. But then again, containers might get moved into another container, right? And then they go into a totally different direction because of many facets, many ways criminal syndicates can do. So the best approach would be for that country to detect and disable that container there and there. Can this be done all the time? Obviously not. When can it be done? We don't know. If it involves terrorism, gun, explosives, maybe the country might react. If it centers around maybe cocaine or class A controlled drugs, maybe, yes, they might react. If it involves counterfeit drugs, maybe they'd be a bit hesitant. So at the end of the day, I think this involves a huge legislation overview, a lot of maturity, especially in the ASEAN level, one ASEAN vision, one ASEAN window. Perhaps they could discuss this at that point in time.
We are actually running out of time. So can I please, maybe Ramesh, your closing points, please. Maybe your top 1 to 3 things, immediate priorities that need to be undertaken by stakeholders in ASEAN. And then, you know, we wrap the session.
Okay, just one point. Public-private partnership. That's all I will say.
Okay, how about Your Excellency, Dr. Hawk? Maybe some closing points from you.
Sorry. Yeah, I would like to say that you know, there should have the ASEAN mechanism to, you know, to cooperate and You know that we have the ASEAN action plan, the action plan for combat counterfeit medicine that we have developed, and the action plan was endorsed by the senior officer of the meeting or the health development SUM-HD in June 2021. So I think we continue to cooperate with among the ASEAN member states and also with other countries in the region. I think this is the way that we committed together among ASEAN countries and other countries in the region. Thank you.
Okay, Puan Saliha, some closing remarks, please.
I think what is important now is public-private partnership within the country, and also, of course, cooperation within ASEAN countries to combat these issues of substandard or falsified medicines. That's
all right,
important.
Brett and Stephen.
Yeah, I think certainly the collaboration between the stakeholders is going to be important. Continuing to develop our regulatory frameworks, continuing to develop our enforcement capabilities, and education of the stakeholders as well as the public, because if the public become more educated about the risks that they face, that's also another piece to the jigsaw puzzle we're trying to solve.
Stephen?
Yeah, for us, I mean, I'm speaking for Sanofi, and I'm sure it's the same at the other big pharma companies. I mean, we stand ready to commit resources and time to any sort of public-private partnership or capacity building that will help us protect our patients.
All right, thank you so much, panelists, for joining me at this breakout session. I hope all of you listening in had, understood the topic at hand better, and we will work together to ensure that this issue will eventually be solved in the future. One can wish, but as Ramesh said, I'm very naive. So thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon, and I'll see you back at the main ballroom.